Welcome to Forged in the Fires podcast with Fireman Rob. Being a fireman, father, veteran, husband, world record holder, and Ironman, he brings stories of experience to impact your life while challenging you to live it. What do you want from your life? Why do you want it? Are you willing to go through the challenges to get there? If you have the courage to take that first step, let this podcast be the catalyst to start your fire while you bring the resilience to make it continue to burn. Our lives are made up of moments called right nows. So let's get started. Forged in the Fires podcast with your host, Fireman Rob, begins now.
All right, welcome back to Forged in the Fires podcast. I'm your host, Fireman Rob. Today, I've got a great guest who is going to be your coach just for this next 30 minutes. He's going to be your mental coach. It's Dr. Duncan Simpson. It's so great to have you on here.
I appreciate it, Rob. I'm excited to join the podcast and hope I can add some value today.
Oh, I know you're going to be able to add value. Just a little backstory from you. I mean, you joined IMG in January of 2017 as the mental conditioning coach. Now, tell me more about what that means from a perspective, because there's a lot of athletes down there from everywhere from the young ones to the Olympic athletes. What does it mean to be a mental conditioning coach?
For us, it's really training the mental skills to help athletes perform at the best, no matter what the circumstances. So I think everyone can be pretty good mentally when there's nothing on the line and everything's going well. But it's also, for us, it's like, how do we train them to be at the best when kind of the best is needed? So that's really the emphasis is, backfilling some of those things and being able to call on those skills when certain situations arise. So my job is to work with the athletes and now oversee a team of mental conditioning coaches that really support our student athletes on a daily basis. And again, from the young ones to the pros. And how do we make sure they're in the best position possible to, succeed in their sport. And then ultimately, we hope that some of these things that we can teach them will transfer to life too.
I love that. That aspect is so huge because, when you're young, you're going to the NBA, you're going to go to the NHL or wherever it is, that higher level. But then when it ends, it's kind of similar to, a lot of college students. Like when it ends, it's like all of a sudden I have to have the mental fortitude to do this thing they call life. How much of what you do in that mental conditioning really translates well on the court or on the field to that daily life? And what are those things that are so important to have those kids understand?
So I think our emphasis really as a team is our primary focus is performance. And we're not going to necessarily move away from that. We want them to be able to excel in their sport now and in the future. But basically, we're equipping them with the skills so that they can be, more well-rounded members of the community. They can be, better brothers, sisters, leaders as they move forward. So if I give a specific, kind of example of a skill. So when we talk about mental skills, there's really, we boil it down to probably there's, 5 or 6 key skills. And what I mean by that, a skill is something very tangible we can teach. So if we think about breathing, self-talk, imagery or visualization, performance planning and reflection, goal setting, those are kind of some of the boilerplate skills. And then if we say, okay, what area are we trying to improve? So for example, if it's a psychological attribute like confidence. So confidence is, what we'd call more of an outcome. We want someone to become confident. So how do they become confident? Well, we work with them through, managing their self-talk, visualization, doing proper goal setting, doing proper performance planning. So again, those skills, self-talk, visualization, etc., as I've listed, those are absolutely transferable. And those are things that as you move forward in life, setting goals is really relevant to whatever you do. Being able to visualize, being able to think through things, make good decisions, your ability to, again, manage your self-talk is absolutely essential. So while we're talking about performance in a very, in a kind of a restricted way in terms of sport, the skills we're teaching will absolutely transfer into the classroom, hopefully into college environment, and then, into their work wherever they, choose to kind of spend their career.
I love that. And now, when you talk about self-talk, I think that's such a huge thing, especially when you're talking about the younger athlete, even to the higher level. I mean, Michael Phelps, admitted that was a huge moment when he said, I had mental health issues. I had troubles, in essence, talking to myself. How do you see that transformation? Do you see it easier for the ones who are coming in who are younger to be able to increase that more positive, more productive self-talk, or is it kind of just person by person?
I think, we know that our self-talk can definitely be improved, and it's something we can train, and it's a skill, and it starts with self-awareness. There's obviously a lot of contextual factors and personality factors, and where we've come from, how we've been raised, that can impact that. We'll have athletes that have come from certain backgrounds where perhaps the parental situation has not been as positive or facilitated as we like, and they've got a really warped or negative self-concept. So for those athletes, changing that is more of a challenge, but it's not something that can be changed. So as athletes come in with a certain viewpoint on themselves, inevitably their self-talk will often reflect that. If they don't feel good about themselves and who they are, or they don't really understand who they are and that identity piece, then self-talk is going to reflect in how they see themselves. So for us, it's really getting to know the athletes on a personal level, making that connection, helping them to open up. And for some athletes, that takes a long time. For some athletes, on day one, they'll tell you anything you want to know. So it is about building those, what I'd say is authentic relationships. And once you actually get to know the person, then it's like, okay, how they're talking to themselves really makes a lot of sense based on all the things I know. And it's not just say, hey, talk more positively. Like, that doesn't work. Really, that doesn't help anybody. But if I understand what's underneath that, then I can say, okay, one, I can obviously have some empathy and obviously help to what's the best approach to potentially making our self-talk more adaptive as opposed to maladaptive.
And I want to go back into how you got to this point. One of the things that you had mentioned is, realizing that you had no job prospects at 22. So it's a kind of that amazing transgression that you got to this point where you're teaching others to, find that potential, find that maximum performance that they have. At 22, what was that feeling that you had?
Yeah, and I can actually, pinpoint a very specific moment. So I had a great time as an undergraduate in college, and I did a physical education degree, but didn't want to be a PE teacher, which kind of limits what you can do with a physical education degree. And I got to, I traveled, I went, I worked and lived in Australia, went to New Zealand and Thailand and had a great time, and got back and, I don't want to be a PE teacher. What am I going to do? And I was actually kind of back home living with my mom, and I went into a bar one night and I saw one of the guys from high school, and I hadn't seen him for like 4 or 5 years, and we played soccer together. And he was like, "Hey, what are you up to?" I was like, "Yeah, I don't really have a job." And he was pretty blunt and perhaps even borderline rude, but he was just like, "Yeah, you always thought you were going to be a big shot in high school, and now you're nothing." And and it was like, whoa. And I kind of took it on the chin, and but I was like, man, like in a lot of ways, like he's right in terms of, in terms of my career, I wasn't going anywhere. I'd had amazing experiences and met a lot of really good people. His, relationships are absolutely valuable, but in terms of my career, I hadn't really got a sense of, where I was going. And my mom was amazing, but not someone that was pushing me to do X. She was, find her own path, which I appreciated. So went back and spoke to one of my old professors, and it was like, what did you like when you were here? And it was always the psychological side of sport. And as an athlete, it's an area that I struggled. I struggle with nerves. I struggle with confidence. I struggle with anger issues. Like I felt that, and it was like something that just resonated. So kind of a long story short, that sent me on the path towards, hey, I'd done a bit of coaching, but coaching wasn't quite for me. Like, hey, maybe there's something here, and started to learn about this field.
Wow. It was funny. You were describing yourself as an athlete, and I was like, sounds like the guy that's behind this microphone. I think, honestly, I think there's a lot to say that I think a lot of athletes really do feel that way. Do you see that when they come in initially? They could be the top level athlete, but it's almost like they still have those same feelings that you were talking about.
Yeah, I think, human nature is, I was listening to something today that was talking about, that innate comparison that we have, especially in Western culture, and in, Buddhist philosophy, it's a lot different in terms of they don't focus on that comparative piece of where I stack amongst my peers.
Right.
So at every level, whatever you're doing, there's, inevitably someone who's probably bigger, faster, stronger, better. And I've had the fortune to, work with very top level athletes, Olympians and pros, and they absolutely have the same insecurities as some of our 10-year-olds, and it shocks you. But then at the same time, it makes sense because, we, as our careers progress, our goals change, and our barometer by which we measure ourselves changes, and all of a sudden our focus is not, down here, it's a lot higher. So, pros compared to pros. So unless you're a Roger Federer or a LeBron James or Serena Williams, whoever you want to pick, then you inevitably comparing. And I'd probably say those guys are comparing too.
Right.
So it's just we're humans. We all have those same insecurities. We all have the same potential for different emotions. It's just how do we manage some of those things, and how do we navigate that as the kind of, complete human experience? How do we live our best life, as corny as that may sound?
But that's such a powerful statement for people, even for me to hear that from somebody of your stature and your level of mental coaching and mental training, to hear like even the pros have that issue. And I think, going back like Michael Phelps, when he admitted it, I mean, most decorated Olympian, everybody's like, oh, he's invincible, there's nothing wrong. Same thing with all the pros that you do. Everybody has these problems, and working through them. I love the when you were talking about what's the most of the 7 catalysts do you most kind of follow or associate with, and it's decisions. How much does daily decisions and past decisions weigh into your ability to, in essence, mentally persevere to that higher level of performance?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't think I'd probably lean on any research here, just from my own experience and working with athletes. We're really a sum of our choices on a daily basis. Yeah. We are where we're at, whether it's our health. We have mitigating circumstances. We have some things that are out of our control, but for the majority of people, our health is, it's a summation of what are the choices we've made on a daily basis. And I'm not here preaching. I'm definitely not perfect.
Right.
But it's, how much exercise you're doing, how you're eating, how you're hydrating, how you're sleeping. We know this. It significantly impacts us. But again, it's not easy to sometimes make those choices. There's a lot of context that goes into that. In terms of athletes, their daily choices, while they may have guidance and they may have structures around them, that there's still autonomy there. You can be part of a team and have a fitness coach and have a nutritionist and have the actual team coach pushing you. But when you're away from that environment, you're still going to make choices. Am I going to go out to the bar tonight? Am I going to, how am I going to eat away from the nutritionist? How am I going to handle interpersonal relationships with spouses and significant others? Like, all those are choices that, we don't get a daily guidance on. We have to grow, and we have to experience life, and nobody's perfect, and we all make mistakes.
Right.
And I think it's just that, hey, how do we learn from those and do the best to move forward? So I think it's, I think something we can do in society right now is have a little more, compassion and less judgment on people. Everyone's ready to pile on people as soon as they make a mistake. Even when there's an apology, people won't accept apology. Like, there's got to be an opportunity for people to hold up their hands and say, look, I'm human. I made this mistake. This is how I'm trying to rectify it. Like, I want to move forward. And I think the more that we can understand and put a little more compassion on other people, everyone's going through something, right? Everyone's going through a civil war inside themselves to some capacity. Like, how do we just do that as a society? And I think, again, I'm not here to kind of preach or stand on my, I think
it's it's an important point you're making.
Yeah. So I think, like, when it comes to resilience, it is one of the, when I work with athletes, it's the easy, hard choices. We simplify it down. A lot of times human nature is to go for comfort, to go for the easy choice, to make the easy decision. And in the long term, it's probably some of those more difficult decisions. It's not about burning yourself out and going crazy every single day. Like, for sport, recovery is absolutely essential. We can't have that meathead approach of just like, you've got to grind for 8 hours a day. You gotta recover, but it's, you've also got to make some tough choices. And sometimes those choices is in around relationships, and it's in around who the people you're going to have in your life. And can you be resilient enough to say, look, this person is taken away from my sport performance, or taken away from me in a relationship form. They're impacting me emotionally. I need to perhaps move away from this person. So some of those choices are difficult too. And
you hit it on the head when you're talking about the aspects of, like, what do you see when these high level athletes who don't like to fail, who don't like to have those down moments? What do you see when they're mentally struggling to move past, like you were saying, some of those choices that they made that were not right? Do you have like certain skills that you try to teach them to be able to move through those more expediently or more effectively?
Yeah, there's a couple of kind of big picture, and it's a little conceptual as opposed to tangible skills. But the two areas that kind of come to mind is, a lot of times I'll work with athletes. What is the story that they're telling themselves? So whatever the situation is, we write our own narratives in our head on any given situation. There's specific facts that occur, like a situation occurs, it is what it is, but it's always, what is that story that we're putting around that? And how is that story impacting us, and how is it serving us or hurting us? So a lot of times when athletes are stuck, perhaps they've had some bad performances, perhaps they're on a slump, whatever you want to call it. It's what is that narrative that they're placing around that? Some athletes like, oh, I haven't got it anymore. I'm in a terrible slump. Like, I'll never get through this. I'm not good enough. I'll never be X. That narrative, it's bringing awareness and bringing that to the surface. So talking through that narrative. And then similarly, one of the techniques that I talk to athletes a lot about is limiting beliefs. And what are those key limiting beliefs that you put on yourself, or what is, usually it's kind of 1 to 3. I tend to find with athletes, like, what is that big limiting belief? So as an example, it might be something like, it'd be pretty vague, but it might be something like, I'll never be good enough. And I'm like, that's something that either a parent has instilled in them, they've created it in their own mind, but it's like, it's almost like a psychological parking brake. It just puts the brake, like, I'm never going to be good enough, or I'm not athletic enough, or I'm not good looking enough, or I'm not X. I can never do this. And it's those absolute terms. And it's like, what are the beliefs like that are underneath this? And I'll give you a real tangible example from myself, because I use this with athletes. I say, for the last 3 years, and one of my colleagues jokes with me, I've said, probably for the last 5 years, I said, look, I'm going to learn Spanish. Like, I've been, I've lived in Miami, I live in Florida, I'm around a lot of Spanish-speaking athletes and coaches. Like, I need to learn Spanish. I really want to learn a second language. But I have this limiting belief in my head that I can't do it. And I feel like, okay, I'm just an average intelligence guy. Of course I can. But I have this belief, I have this limiting belief around myself that I can't learn a second language. I'm not sure quite where it's been instilled, but it's just been there, and I still haven't overcome it enough to like. I've bought Rosetta Stone, and I've tried some of the apps.
It didn't just sink in.
Yeah, I haven't got it. So again, when I tell athletes, I'm like, listen, I teach this stuff and I taught you guys, but I'm not perfect. This is my limiting belief. And they kind of laugh, but they get the idea. So with athletes, it's like understanding the story and also what are those deep rooted beliefs that they have, and how do we change beliefs? That's
so important to understand that story. That's I suffer from I should say I have post-traumatic stress disorder, and that story, I mean, that's the hardest thing to do, is to take away the story behind the pain or the challenges. And I love what you just said, because it's so important for people to do, not just athletes, but everybody. I know that you've talked on a few other podcasts about self-assessments. When you look at mental, conditioning and fortitude, what is that self-assessment that people can do to kind of start off to take that first step?
Yeah, I think, we use, if I take it as a very, use the term in a literal sense, like we'll use different forms of assessment with our athletes. And the reason we do that, one, we want to put some kind of validity and reliability around, okay, we're going to work with this athlete on this area. Right. But ultimately, it's, for an individual, is to go through a process by which they're forced to kind of have that self-awareness, bring it to the surface. What are my strengths? What are my areas that I need to work on? And again, we don't just focus on, hey, these are your weaknesses. Hey, we need to make you more resilient or more confident. It's like, for every individual, whatever time we're at, like, we all have a lot of strengths. Right. Now we can be on a spectrum, and people can be challenged by mental health, but we all have a lot of strengths. And at different times in our lives, we have all been focused and confident and resilient. Now it's bringing those things to the surface. So in terms of assessment, we go through it to bring that self-awareness, and then to honestly, when you actually give an athlete, hey, these are some of the scores, or this is why we're going to work on X, Y, and Z. It gives them hope. And when I say hope, it's like they recognize, hey, there's a path forward. Like confidence, it's very conceptual for athletes. It's like, I don't feel confident, but it's like, hey, look, we're going to work on confidence, and here's the plan, and this is why we're going to work on it, X, Y. So that all of a sudden, athletes like, oh, okay, there's a way forward here. And just giving athletes, one, that self-awareness, and then that plan and hope that we can move forward and improve these areas, it can have just a really significant impact, and you haven't even done anything yet. But I think assessment is part of that self-awareness process. And again, we try and do an actual tangible assessment, self-assessment, but we'll also do assessment with our coaches, peers, observation, and then using our own experience to say, okay, what is the areas that are going to have the biggest impact on you personally, and also for your sport.
It's amazing that the amount of power that hope has, like that you can get better. It's amazing that power that you have. I'm sure you see that in all the levels that you help with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something coming back, sorry, Rob, to Michael Phelps, an example of athletes that struggle with mental health challenges. If when we actually think about it and reflect on it, it's like, I think 99% of, society, if you went through what Michael Phelps went through in terms of just the amount of scrutiny, the amount of training, the amount, just like, who wouldn't struggle? Like, who wouldn't struggle in those situations?
Who wouldn't give up?
Exactly. And I think about, we're all going through this human experience. So when we think about our service members and the people who put their lives on the line, like it shouldn't be a surprise. It's really, we should be doing our absolute best to do everything possible to support these people, because anybody going through significant challenges, whether, putting your life on the line as yourself, firefighters, police, all the services, and then obviously the military. Like we have an absolute duty to support them 100% in one, being proactive and helping them develop those skills going into the situations, but then also, post situation is do our very best to support people, because we're all human and we absolutely will all go through challenges, and those challenges are unique. And so I just want to say that, like, it's just there's got to be less judgment on people, and there's definitely got to be more understanding and support. And it's so not financial.
Yeah.
When people criticize, like, how can you be depressed? You're an elite athlete and you have millions of dollars, and it's just like, come on, we're better than that. If you've gone through a lot of the situations that people have been through, you would understand. And I think when we seek to understand, we're just better people. We're better as society.
You gave me chills when you said that, because that's such a powerful statement, is that giving a little empathy, giving a little space, but at the same time understanding. I think that's where hopefully as a society and for athletes moving towards that, and you're part of that movement. I greatly appreciate you being able to do that for the athletes, and then having that translate into our communities. And it's been just an honor to have you on today. And I always end with the same 3 questions. So are you ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. If you could go back to your 18-year-old self, what would be one piece of advice that you'd give yourself?
Great question.
That long pause was great, because
I want to say nothing, because everything works out. I use
That's
it with
perfect.
my wife all the time. Is just like, if it hasn't worked out, everything works out in the end. If it hasn't worked out, it's not the end. And I use that continuously. Like, I believe situations work out. I'm not talking about a higher power. Just like if you just keep at it, things will work out. But I would say probably just, I'd probably tell my 18-year-old self to meditate more and exercise more and sleep more and eat better food.
Yeah, your 18-year-old self would say, no way.
I'd say meditate more would be probably number one.
Yeah. Your 18-year-old self would probably ignore that, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he had no interest in that at all.
I had one person one time said, well, here's what I think is, if I went back to my 18-year-old self, I'd probably ask myself, what are you doing here? So, all right, here's number 2. If you could, a lot of people, like you were saying, are going through struggles, are going through challenges. If you could give them 2 things that they could incorporate into their daily routine, whether it be in the morning or the afternoon, what would those 2 things be?
Yeah, I want to be really deliberate here, because it's something that I so value that. Yeah. I think the 2 areas that would be most tangible, and again, I'll probably regret my comments. I'll be like, oh man, I wish I had something more insightful.
Remember, we're not perfect. You even said that.
Yeah, but I think going through, like, one, I think meditation has amazing power, and you can call it mindfulness, you can call it whatever you want, but I think that has a amazing potential for so many people. Yeah. And then the second one is, and again, super simplistic, but I think just sharing. I think just finding that 1 or 2 people you can talk to. I think a lot of mental health challenges, and being around athletes and being around individuals that have had those struggles, it's so internal, and people bottle it up because it's a sign of, quote unquote, they feel like it's a sign of weakness, or, right, they're going to be judged, or, whatever the stigma they want to put around it, and people don't talk. And I'd just be like, oh man, just find someone you can talk to. Yeah. Whoever that person is, and share your challenges. And when you do that, I think, you half the problem, you half it. And again, and then I think through sharing and through talking, and, you'll get a little bit deep, and you'll find a little more, you'll find the words, and you'll find the right person to then connect to. So I think meditation, but then, talking. I don't know if you saw the UFC the other night with
Yeah, I did see that.
Paddy the Baddy, right? Like,
yeah, amazing.
Cry on my shoulder. Like,
yeah.
That's just such a great message.
Yeah, it is, and from such a tough person, you hit it on the head, and those two things, such powerful things, and especially I think, like you said, we're getting into that age where people are starting to transition and starting to talk more, which is great, and it's okay now. Like you said, that the UFC fighter saying that, you want somebody tough. They're about as tough as they get. All right, this last one's fun. This is going to be a challenging one for you. No, I'm just kidding. All right, if you could have coffee at a firehouse table. So in other words, you can ask any question. No, nothing's off the table. With three people, deceased or alive, who would they be and why?
Oh man, yeah. Again, great question. I read I think the title's Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela. I read that when I was pretty young, and it's a pretty big and heavy book. And I was born in Tanzania. Really? That's a whole other story. But I have certainly a connection to Africa, and that book resonated, and his story has always resonated with me. So I'd love to talk with him. I've been a big admirer of the way how he's handled himself. I don't necessarily always agree with his policies, but Barack Obama is someone that I thought that was a significant leader in our time. And again, not everything I completely agree with, but I'd definitely love to talk to him. And then I was listening to the podcast today, and it was about kind of part of it was about kind of mindfulness. And so this sounds really sexist because I'm picking three males, but I'd have to sit down with the Dalai Lama and I'll be like,
oh, that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah. Like there's so much wisdom every time I've heard him talking to people who I've heard that have met him, and they talk about just the authenticity with it. And you're like, is this person kind of everything? People build him up and they're like, it's everything and more. So I think that, that's
a good table.
Man, I picked three males there, so I feel a little bit bad.
But they all had powerful females that helped them.
Yes.
There's been female influence, so that's always the thing. Is like you always have powerful minds get to be powerful minds because they, like you said earlier, it's the people that you surround yourself with. Yeah.
So. Absolutely. So I think those three, and again, those are flexible, and they may change over time. Politics.
Our next podcast episode we'll have you'll have three new ones because you'll be thinking about this the next few months.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Dr. Duncan Simpson, it's been an honor to have you. He works at IMG Academy. Make sure you go on and check out IMG Academy. It's unbelievable. If you have a son or a daughter, or you yourself are an athlete, it's a great thing to look at. And like you've been talking about, performance depends a lot on mental toughness and developing that mental strength. So thank you again, Duncan, for being on today.
Thank you ever so much for having me on, and have a great rest of the week, everybody.
Thanks for listening and supporting the Forged in the Fires podcast with Fireman Rob. Remember, don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast, and please share this episode with a friend or family. To find out more about Fireman Rob or reach out about a question, go to www.firemanrob.com. Until next time, live your life forged in the fires.